Welcome back again to the Imaginary Gallery. This is the follow-up discussion on the previous video, which was from Sandra Brown's How to Spot a Dangerous Person Before You Get Involved. And yes, I struggled a little bit as I went through because I had to jump in and give some ADHD moments, but figured I would bite the tongue most of the time. I thought I did pretty well. Oh, and before going into this, too, I wanted to take a special moment to thank all of you out there who have commented, liked, subscribed, and one thing I have to mention is if you're going to have the audacity to click dislike, then put something down to explain why you dislike, because I'm all into feedback. And if, for example, I rarely watch my own videos after they're like done because sometimes I spend way too much time in the editing room, and by the time I'm through, it's like, okay, I've seen it a million times, but every so often I will click on one, and I, of course, picked the Narcopath series and thought, this is a crazy, weirdo person, but I still got the humor because, of course, I created it, but I'm always perplexed when I see the dislike, though, because if I dislike something, I'm going to tell you why. Like, I loved your content, but that noise that you kept making with your mouse was annoying, or the fact I couldn't hear your audio was sickening, or something. But so, if you're going to dislike something, please elaborate. Don't just dislike and run, because how can I ever improve? So, welcome to Fondue for Two. Yeah, I am mentally ill. This is to go along with the spirit of Sandra L Brown's disclaimer about mental illness, because she treats them, and I think we're all a little bit mentally ill if we're living in today's world. But point is that I agree with her chapter that she's not there to say, oh, someone's mentally ill, which, again, what's mental illness anyway? It's somebody's opinion. For all we know, that person's the enlightened one who has those characteristics. However, what we're talking about are the dangerous ones, because you can be a person who's a weirdo here or there, but you don't mean any harm to anybody. But you can also be a person who's totally mentally ill, like that narcopath witch, who appears to be the most normal thing in your life, and of course, yet behind the scenes, the most horrifying havoc is being wreaked without your knowledge. So let's just move along. Okay, for this reflection, I'll try to keep it short, but although it was one of the shortest chapters in the book, it triggered the most ideas for asides and ADHD moments, which I tried to keep to a minimum. So we will move along again and critique or discuss Sandra Brown's How to Spot. We've covered the name 1,000 times, so. Now, at first she's talking about Mike the Meltdown and basically warning you that why would you dare want to take on a life with such a person. Okay, so I get it. She's wanting to not stigmatize the idea of being mentally ill. She's telling us how she treats such people. But then she goes on to say that the reason why it earned the chapter in her book is because many patients who are diagnosed with some of these conditions do have a tendency to be dangerous. So I think she's trying to be safe, which I agree. I think I said it earlier. You can be a weirdo and not want to hurt others, or you can be a weirdo who is hell bent on destroying others. However, and the fact that she mentions that there are these illnesses out there and patients who, for example, do not treat their symptoms, which that's a different video on if I believe in the pharmaceuticals given to us are really helping us, chemtrails or... Okay, ADHD is not coming into this video tonight. And back to our reflection. When I read the part about her telling us to move away from images of mentally ill individuals from movies, I beg to differ, which I didn't mention them in the last one, but she states that the portrayals depicted in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Silence of the Lambs, and A Beautiful Mind won't help us detect dangerous people in our own lives, she says. But I'd add The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, because Peyton Flanders was a perfect, textbook example of many of the dates I've gone through with it. ADHD. But I disagree somewhat, but at the same time, yes, in a movie you've only got so many minutes to give your story, but still, sometimes I can't help but think, yeah, it's a movie, yeah, it's dramatic, but you know what? It's actually pretty realistic. And of course, next, I think Sandra's being a little naive, where she says she's she's basically giving excuses for them, but she's stating that many people have escaped diagnosis because their true condition has escaped detection, and or whenever they sought treatment, and that she says a person with a clinically diagnosable mental illness may not even know he or she has one. It's that's not the ones I've met. They know they've got it. But again, she's a different person. It lies with us to detect it, which we're not psychologists, psychiatrists. We can't make diagnoses, but she's still telling us that when they're clinically diagnosable and not diagnosed, it's up to us. Okay, Sandra, we are all now psychiatrists. Anyway, I get what she's saying. But the important thing that she mentions is that when you meet a person with whatever mental illness it may be, one of the problems is that it is hardwired into the personality structure. And the problems do not change, which I can attest is true. They do not change. They may switch disguises, but they do not change. She says, if you, for example, have a goal of eventually finding some life partner fantasy, Farrah Fawcett, Mary Poppins. Okay, I don't know where that came from. Happily ever after lifetime. which I thought was kind of cruel when she mentioned about why would a person who's ill fit the bill for you, and talking about the hospitalization and depression. That, I think, she went a bit far on, which I don't know Sandra Brown. I'm just reading her book, but I gained a lot from it. But at the same time, I can also critically think about it, to think that what if you're with someone who seems fine and then they snap, and just the way she's talking about them, like, so people do get hospitalized. You're going to abandon them? What? But anyway, I guess she's trying to warn you. When you meet that hot stranger who's so cute and charming but displays mental illness, you think, oh, I'm going to marry him. And then she's warning you, I guess, that, yeah, you can marry him, but get ready for a lifetime of hell. And then I do think it's interesting how she mentioned about the word possible was a loophole. Because she's saying, why would a life of possible hospitalization, crime, depression, manic, whatever? Well, yes, I understand the bad boy / bad girl deal where, let's say you live, let's say, a normal type life, and then you meet the bad boy or bad girl. It's kind of refreshing to see someone living differently than you. Of course, you're not probably considering the person's mentally ill, but it's just exciting. One part that I found very interesting is, when she's talking about the exception, which I know I have thought that before, which was a total delusion, but I would be with somebody who would display retarded, disgusting traits, and I would fool myself to think, you know what? Sure, I saw those traits that I've seen before that are horrible, but I think I found the exception. Wrong. Many times, or a lot of times, that is wrong. But we want to believe this because we've invested this and we've invested that, and we like this and we like that, so we just want to make it all right. But unfortunately, it does not always work that way. But she reminds us that professionals in the field of psychology, they know that, as I've stated to countless cluster B monsters, the fact that the best predictor of future behavior is usually past behavior, which we can go on a tangent here. I met a person who was with another person who flirted with me and then left the other person and came to me, and you know what I said? Like, I was thinking this without even reading it here. I'd say, yeah, you were just with your previous partner and you left it to come to me, which means you're going to be with me for a while, and then you're going to switch to the next. And of course, these mentally ill persons will say things like, oh no, I would never, I'm going to be with you forever. And you're supposed to think that you're some kind of exception, but then you have to wonder, which I've learned to, I bet this person said that to the previous one and the one before that, which they probably did, and they actually did. Sandra talks about the one thing you cannot be sure about, which is the patient's future stability. And I thought it was interesting how she'd mentioned how what he or she looks like, acts like, and functions like today may not be true in a week. Oh, please, is that not the truth? Oh, she says a week, a month, or a year from now. Fluctuations in that patient's mental health are based on numerous factors that you can't predict. Stress, medical disease issues and reactions to medications or drugs. But then she talks about her domestic violence shelter, and she found women who were running away from mentally ill men, hustling target after target. And of course they're not going to tell that to the next potential target. So when you're like, wait a second, why would you do this, this? And they will try to convince you that, oh, that's the past, even though it was 5 minutes ago. So it is disgusting, and it's what they will do, and I've experienced it on multiple occasions. And here's my counter argument for it. Let's say you see a whore who's gone from person to person to person to person, and then one day sets eyes on you in the same time frame. And all of a sudden you talk, and you know what you've seen, but you still talk, and then all of a sudden it's, I really like you. I really think you're great. I think we could be something special. Well, you know what you know. And when it continues talk like that, it's very common for some of us to be like, well, wait a second. Didn't you just get through being involved with this? And then you'll get this retarded, non-reality based script, which is, oh yes, I did all that, but that's the past. I don't do that anymore. And of course the logical question is, oh really? Since when? A minute ago? But they will try to convince you of the non-reality that just because I used to do that yesterday doesn't mean I do anymore. And I'm thinking, just because you did that yesterday and now you say you don't anymore means you have a scam planned for me to take over something. No. But another interesting point I thought she made was when she talks about how many times the women, or I'll say men, are attracted to these types of people is because they themselves are thrill seekers, which I've always told the cluster B monsters I've been involved with, like, you're a thrill seeker. You deliberately told me you were doing nothing yesterday as you did something I shouldn't know about just to get away with, well, thrill seekers. Well, there are thrill seekers out there, and some people don't want just some pure, clean domestic life where nothing ever goes wrong. So they're drawn to the magnetic force field of these types of people. I also found it interesting how she mentions how the women or men who are drawn to these mentally ill types, they like the dramatic ups and downs. It keeps life interesting. And they're ones who have a little edge to them. Or maybe have their own histories of crime, addiction, or mental health issues. Then she turns around and says, on the other hand, it isn't totally unusual for the mild-mannered, even passive person who like these particular bad boys slash girls. And she thinks it means they're taking a walk on the wild side. Now, Sandra had said to look at your patterns, determine whether one or both of your adults who raised you were mentally ill, and if they were, it may help you see which type of mentally ill person you are likely to select in the future, or have selected in the past. And Sandra says that the bottom line is that the mentally ill man must find women who will disregard his disruptive and sometimes pathological behavior. He needs a woman who's hyper patient and who is willing to forego normalcy for him. Another part I found interesting was towards the end, where she's talking about why they are successful. Mentally ill people are successful with their partners because some of their symptoms can be hidden. And when I read that, I think covert narcissist / cluster B. But believe it, if you're one of these men or women who have mental illness, whatever it may be, if you want to get along in the real world, you have to learn to hide it, which goes hand in hand with all those other videos I've made.
Please do not fear human cloning. It can be beautiful, can it, sweetie?
I
Still haven't found.
But I'm so proud to know now that
So many celebrities that I thought were deceased are actually alive and well. And perverted as hell. And I love it. I am the new narcopath. I'm even better than the other one. I'm transhuman.
I'm transgendered. And I'm a lesbian, a man, and a woman.
Don't worry about her. She malfunctioned. I'm her replacement.